Welcome to the second session of day two of Talk Connect, week one with the spotlight on the Americas. This morning's session provided us with the key indicators regarding maritime trade in the Americas, as well as the effect that the pandemic, new e commerce trends, and port congestion have had on the supply chain. This session now will dive into one of the most widely spoken subjects of our industry, digital transformation. What is digital transformation? We keep hearing about this, but how much do we actually know about it? How can we benefit from it, from the ever evolving digitalization process, whose impact already shows in our industry? To discuss these and many more questions, I am delighted to present Pascal Olivier, President of Maritime Street, who will be moderating the session and introducing our fine panel of speakers. Before we begin, I would like to mention some housekeeping remarks. Please remember that you may use the chat box on our platform to pose your questions. These will be then passed on to Pascal. Also, should you have any technical difficulties, do let us know, and a member of our team will be in touch. Thank you, and over to you, Pascal.
Thank you, Matteo. Good day, everyone. Very pleased to be at Talk Americas again. Digital transformation is really a very interesting subject. When we see what's happened for the last almost 20 years, I've been spending on my side lots of my time since 2005. So 16 years in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's fantastic to see the transformation which is happening where the culture of paper is very important in Latin America and in South and Central America in particular. And when we are moving away, still, moving towards, paperless, but, it's very interesting. For that purpose, I'm very pleased to have with me today 4 great speakers in their different own field. We have Joanna Alvarez. Joanna is the lead on the Maritime Single Window project for the Ministry of Foreign Trade of Peru, the Min Center, and among other things, Joanna is going to address a very unique innovation, what is happening in Peru right now on the Maritime Single Window, among other projects that they are doing in terms of innovation, but as one of the best business case in the world on a full-fledged Maritime Single Window for port call automation. We will have then after Carlos Ricardo, the Chief Operating Officer of Logite in Veracruz, Mexico. Good to have again Logite here. We met 2 years ago at TOC Cartagena with Danielle, and it was a fantastic discovery, and we will be keen to know what happened for the last 2 years, as you are one of the few startups that we have in the continent. Then we're going to move to Jorge Barnett, who is the Managing Director of Georgia Tech Panama, and also introducing to us the ecosystems of Panama in terms of innovation. And we will have also Gadi Ben Moshe, is the Chief Executive Officer of Marine Innovator, addressing in particular the ecosystems of innovation and startups and venture capital in Israel. Without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to Joanna. The floor is yours, Joanna.
Good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First, I want to thank TOC event for allowing me to be sharing with you in the digital transformation for foreign trade and maritime sector that we are developing in Peru. I also want to thank to the work of Pascal Olivier, whose participation in some of the projects that we have been promoting has been very important. And to greet Jorge Barnett Lodon, Ricardo Ortiz, and Gary Ben Moshe, who are with me in this important panel. Today, we are going to quickly review how digital transformation is a great tool in the facilitation of Peruvian foreign trade. Next, please. How do we understand the digital transformation in Peru? Digital transformation is the continuous, disruptive, strategic, and cultural change process that is based on the intensive use of digital technologies, big data, IoT, cloud, data science, blockchain, cybersecurity. Let's see. Systematization and analysis data to generate economic, social, and valuable effects for people. Next slide, please. Why digital government? In this highly competitive and constantly evolving world, public agencies and the private sector in general need to transform to adapt to the demand required by the digital age. The construction of digital capabilities at a level requires a significant change throughout the organization. A change in mentality is urgently needed, and the design of strategies that accompany the process. Digital transformation implies a commitment for senior management for its implementation. In Peru, the legal framework to establish a digital government and digital transformation system is recent. We observe in this slide that the laws and their respective regulations are from 2018, 2020, and 2021. It's recent. Additionally, because of COVID-19 pandemic, from Minsatur we promoted Legislative Decree 1492, approving provisions for reactivation, continuity, and efficiency of operation linked to the foreign trade and logistic change, which came into effect on May 9, 2020, last year. This decree is very important in the actions of the sector and the coordination with the other government agencies involved in foreign trade and the supply chain, as it provides the safe legal framework to continue in a digital environment. Next, please. The digital government law in Peru established the governance framework for the proper management of digital identity, digital services, digital architecture, digital security and data protection, and interoperability. In addition to establish the legal regime applicable to the transversal use of digital technologies in the digitalization of processes and provision of digital services by public administration at 3 government levels: national, regional, and local. This policy is of the high level since it oversees the Presidents of the Council of Ministers in Peru. Next, please. They are 6 the benefits of digital transformation in the government: digital citizen as public value, digital trust, government transparency, data-based decision-making, citizens and companies empowerment, and integration and development. This is the benefits establishment in the law of digital government. Next, please. What is the digital transformation in the foreign trade by public sector? Digital transformation in the foreign trade policy in Peru is led by Minsatur, Ministry of Foreign Trade and Tourism, which understands that the search for export competitiveness requires having instruments that allow the exporter to reach the destination market in the best conditions. For this, in the facilitation plan with framework of PENG's National Exporter Plan, different strategies were developed to achieve macroeconomic and fiscal, finance, custom and land, air and maritime infrastructure competitiveness. In the pillar 3, the figure are in circle, being one of the most important results in trade facilitation is the development of the single window for foreign trade, BUCE for its acronym in Spanish. This is intended to order and facilitate the procedures that importers, exporters, international carriers, and other economic operators carry out before the state make commercial operators viable international. Next slide, please. What is BUCE? The trade facilitation tool. The BUCE is an integrated system that allows, through electronic means, the parties involved in foreign trade and international transport to exchange the information required or relevant for the entry, exit, or transit of goods and means transportation from or to the national territory. As well, it enables users to manage the documentation and information regarding the procedures and services related to foreign trade that are processed by the system. In 23 years, the MINSA tool promote the implementation of the National Exporting Strategic Plan, PENS, with horizon 10 years to 2013. One of the thematic areas raised in the PENS was foreign trade facilitation, established as one of measures to follow the implementation of a single window for all procedures. The single window the boost starts operation in 2020. In 2017 starts the BUSE 2.0 project. It's a portfolio of projects to improve foreign trade facilitation services through the single window for foreign trade, because we understand that it's necessary to renew the services and review the processes into the window. The objectives the BUSE 2.0 project is optimize processes and simplify foreign trade paperwork, reduce transaction time and cost, provide systematized, updated, and intelligent information on foreign trade, international logistics, strengthen public entities linked to foreign trade. And the components, establishment 4 components in the project BUSE 2.0. Starting with the simplification of foreign trade processes, which includes a series of initiatives, among them an analysis of the current processes in each of the agencies and authorities that participate in BUSE, total 20. A diagnosis at the level of process, human, technological, legal, resources, and monitoring of main indicators. With this information, the process were redesigned considering the normalization data and the standardization process and administrative simplification regarding to the legal framework. As part of all this work, we need to develop a series of transversal components such as digital file, authentication system, new electronic payment gateway, a review the legal framework, establishment the strength of the new legal framework for BUSE. In other hand, equipment was donated as a part of an action for different institutions involved in BUSE. The second component is aimed to designing and implementing the BUSE 2.0 platform, whose modules are designed based on the result component number 1. In component 3, different information services for foreign trade as the market access portal and foreign trade regulation, logistical observatory of foreign trade and information, logistical services module, big data tool have been identified and developed. And in the component 4, as one of the most important initiatives, different types of training have been developed for officials of institutions or agencies, or to stakeholders and to users to strengthen capacities and generate value for organization. This is the scope of BUSE 2.0 project. Next, please. The projects managed by the BUSE 2.0 portfolio can be divided into 6 categories: transactional, for services, information portal, strengthening of public agencies, and transversal services. The most notorious we have the CP 2.0, which consists of the implementation of a new maritime single window, includes the processes of arrival, stay, and dispatch of vessels to the ports of Peru. Other is the design of the Callao PCS master plan, which has already been concluded, and later the implementation of the first phase of the Callao PCS, which is the first platform of its kind in Peru. Callao is our main commercial port. Another experience work highlighting is the interoperability in the framework of the Pacific Alliance integrated by Mexico, Colombia, Chile, and Peru. The first document that was standardized and incorporated is the phytosanitary certificate. The second is the origin certificate, both in operation. And the third document, work in progress, is the customs declaration. This project is undoubtedly one of the best of its kind in Latin America. Other mentioned projects is the technological system implementation and technological infrastructure equipment, and capacity buildings for officials to different agencies. Next slide, please. Okay. Some results of BUSE. BUSE starts operations on 2010, and this result is about 10 years. No? 4 million formalities approximately, 42 million sheets of unprinted papers, approximately 250 million of USA dollars, for example. In others is, for example, relative to payment for last year, 54% digital payment, and then 46% physical payment. No, this percentage change year by year. Initial in 2010, all payment is physical, no? But in the last year, this is the first year, digital payment is more transactions than physical payment. No, it's a good example. The digitalization, the culture of digitalization assumed by private sector. Next, please. It's essential to understand the integration between different platforms for the maritime port sector developed or to be implemented by BUSE 2.0 project. In this slide, we observe the scheme of integration. No? The BUSE is the main platform, have many components as CP 2.0, it's a maritime single window. Others on restricted good component, origin component, new freight trade zone system, PIMEX, logistic observatory, different components. Main components and transversal components is authentication, digital file, electronic payment, electronic signature or digital signature, different transversal components for all the platform. The maritime single window have different modules as arrival and dispatch, stay, health certificate, and complementary services. This maritime single window, the scope is B2G. It's the private sector inform different operations or require authorizations to different authorities incorporate to CP 2.0. Other platform, external platform, is the PCS. No? PCS is a neutral platform designed for the community. The scope is B2G and B2B. Just include the different, different two modules, maritime services and port services. Interoperate with BUSE. For Callao Port, the phase to different stakeholders is the PCS. No, all the requirements related to maritime services or port services, it's the PCS. In the other hand, it's the PMS. PMS Callao, it's the system for National Port Authority and will serve for the management of all its control operations as an authority. This is the PMS receive information from BUSE and from PCS by interoperability. In the top of the slide, we observe different actors, no? Interact, maritime agent, custom agent, exporters, importers, producers, support agencies as laboratories, different actors. This is the biggest scope, the interaction with CP 2.0, which is a maritime single window, the trade single window names BUSE, the PCS for Callao, and PMS is the ecosystem. Well, this is all from my part. Maybe it's a lot of items in a short time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Joanna, for this comprehensive presentation. As really, if there is one thing to mention, is the race of digitalization is really there in Peru, and what is one main key takeaway? It is also the support from the head of states, especially with 3 weeks ago, as you mentioned, the president issued the supreme decree to establish the digital public infrastructure known as 006 2021. So I think it's 2020. So I think it's very important. Now we're going to move to Carlos Ricardo from Logity to tell us about what is Logity as a startup is doing in digital transformation. Ricardo, the floor is yours. You are muted, Carlos. We cannot hear you.
Okay, Kobe, sorry.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Yeah, okay, I'm going back. So, okay, again, hello everyone, thanks for having me. I'm Carlos Ricardo, Chief Operating Officer in Logity. Logity is a company focused on digitizing custom process in Latin America. So I'm going to explain 3 main points in this keynote, based on my experience working in the technology system. The first will be the recognition of the difference between digitation and digitalization. Why? Because in Spanish, we only have one meaning, digitalización. And it's so important to recognize the difference, to understand as Latinos where we are and what we need to be more competitive in an industry ruled by speed and bottlenecks. You know what I mean. So the second point is dedicated to giving examples about the startups and unicorns working to enhance the supply chain, and obviously in logistics industry. In the last point, well, I will touch about what challenges have a huge impact in our community and how we can take advantage of new technologies, trends, and corporate programs. So, well, as I mentioned before, what are the differences between those 3 words, digitizing, digitalizing, and digital transformation? So, digitalization represents a transformation from physical data to digital data. This process represents a huge part of Latin American companies. Many of them are struggling to understand digital migration and how the data could help the value proposition of their products and services. The electronic bill of lading is a perfect example of the digitization stage. Digitalization is a change in the business model and provides new revenue as a consequence of the implementation of technology. These include web or mobile apps, hardware, geolocalization, cybersecurity, etc. A good example is digital freight forwarders, running along with automation, analytics, and visibility services. That's too important. Now, let's touch on digital transformation. This is a result of the last of two definitions together in advance to change an industry, strategy, and culture. The perfect example is in how music changed to digital platforms or in the entertainment given by Netflix series. Even Merzline, the freight company, is changing to a business model with an active role as a log-tech startup investor. So, these three examples of software as a service represent the Latin America technology adoption. Flexford is the first logistics company backed by Y Combinator. They provide a digital freight forwarding platform. The second is CargoX. It's a marketplace to connect truck freight services in Brazil. They raised $190 million in VC funding. And Taxer is the first product developed to ease the complex process of customs tariffs classification. Driven by artificial intelligence, recognized HS codes from more than 5 billion goods. Taxer was selected for running the first corporate program, Delta X, from Puerto de Cartagena in Colombia. Well, as I mentioned, those companies took advantage of pain points and they understood how when they use the available technology, opportunities around the world as a single window, or intelligence ports are moving the industry to build new products. So there are two challenges, in my opinion, for Latin America. The first is IT talent scarcity. The market demand for IT profiles is growing and salaries are too high to be paid by small companies. As a result, we have a low and slow IT adoptions for IT solutions. The fears of cloud services, cybersecurity, remote working belong to an endless list of obstacles. Well, but we have good news. Is that the new trend, such as no-code or low-code apps? Products designed to build apps, dragging elements, or customizing features easily. This represents the possibility to create faster pilots and tests, reducing the friction with users. And the last one, in the introduction of new paradigm about collaboration between corporate programs and scale-ups and startups. Port of Singapore, Spain, Germany launch applications to find out digital solutions around the world. So, finally, these slides represent a glance at my experience working in the digital transformation business, and think that we are in the best epoch because we are moving to understand all the data behind logistics. And the new discoveries, believe me, will be amazing. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. There is my email and obviously the URL for my company. Thank you very much, and back to you, Pascal.
Yes, thank you, Ricardo. It's very impressive to see what is the progress of digital solution really in Latin America. I think one key takeaway that I'd like to focus on is the human capital in building the workforce. It is clear that the disruptive technology, the AI of the world of tech, demonstrate the need to bring new generation of people coming from our industry, but coming from outside our industry into maritime trade and logistics as well. And it's where the academy the labs, startups have a big role to play, and we will be discussing that on with the next two panelists. Now I'm going to give the floor to Jorge from Georgia Tech, Panama. Georgia.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Pascal?
Everything is all right.
Okay. Well, thank you. Good afternoon, and thanks to you all for allowing me to share some time with you. I think it's a privilege for all of us to be here. And I mean, it's a shame we can't be in person, but part of the whole digital transformation in the very global concept, in the more broad concept, has been adjusting to the new reality and remote work and all of these tiny little challenges that add up to a lot. So I'm going to cover a little bit today about the concept of adding value through digital transformation. And I'm going to mention some successes and some challenges in Panama and Latin America, mainly focus on Panama because as Ricardo shared briefly, there's a lot of things going on. I think it's very important that we see that there's a lot of success that we have to share, but at the same time, we still have to ramp up speed, and speed is an issue in this rapidly changing world. So I'm going to start with a model because, as a researcher, this is what we do. We start with a model. And I'm borrowing this from Port of Rotterdam. They have this nice white paper published online, and it discusses digital maturity of interconnected port systems. And the reason I show this is because it helps us understand that just the same way we mature, systems also have to mature. In some way, you could argue that systems adjust to the needs of the partners involved. And how far you automate and how far you make it digital has to do a lot with the needs in the surrounding stakeholders. So there's these 4 levels that they discuss. The first one is digitalizing individual components or individual parties within the port area. The second level adds a layer on top of that, and it discusses integrating systems across the port community. And this is what we generally understand in the port business as a PCS. We see the PCS as the enabler of all this. But the process of actually achieving this interconnection is very complex. It involves quite a burden of work. Aligning the stakeholders and sensibilizing them to the reality of the new business is very important. Then the third level of maturity involves integrating the logistics chain with the hinterland, with all the other actors that are beyond the borders of the port. With the importers and all the other people involved in the business. And this actually involves an even greater level of complexity. You could kind of assume that complexity increases faster than linear, than the number of actors involved. It much faster than linear. This is the problem with complexity. It doesn't grow at the speed of the stakeholders you add. It grows faster than that. And then the fourth level is interconnected ports at a global scale. So the global chain, and this is the ideal, the vision. And there are some elements of that are being implemented in a way, but we have to be aware that this involves other levels of complexity because we're talking about competitors joining forces and working with each other. So each of these involves a challenge, and you could pretty much wonder, where are we at in Latin America? Generally, most ports that have entered this digital framework, they obviously start at level 1. And this is where most terminals put a lot of effort because what you're trying to do is extract all this internal value. But 2 and 3 is pretty much where the cutting edge ports in the region have been moving towards, mainly 2, to be honest. But there are some people working on level 3 because they understand the business goes way beyond their borders. And the more we incorporate other people, the more we can extract value from the data we generate within our business, which is quite a lot. So going back to where are we at, I would summarize it with 3 key points. The first one is private sector efforts are at a more advanced and mature stage in general. However, public sector-led efforts have generally been more on the digitization side, with a few very relevant exceptions, of course. And Joanna just showed one. They have a clear vision of what they want to achieve. And that falls on what Ricardo defined as the concept of digitalization rather than digitization. But many projects start on the digitization side without necessarily a clear plan. Recent focus has shifted more towards integration and public-private collaboration because it has been understood, especially from public sector stakeholders, that you have to take a step far. You have to go a step farther. You cannot get stuck on digitizing a single process and just trying to make it a tiny bit faster, because this marginal improvement, yes, it adds up, but it takes a ton of effort just to achieve these marginal improvements. It doesn't make sense. Sometimes you have to transform the whole business to actually make it competitive in this rapidly changing world. And part of the reason for that gap between public and private has been continuity and sustainability, because it's not easy to sustain initiatives in a pandemic and post-pandemic world. Sometimes I'm hesitant of using the whole post-pandemic concept, but in the pandemic world, in the COVID world, sustainability is an issue because of funding. Obviously, most economies have been hit hard. That puts a strain on resources, especially on the public side, to continue financing some projects. And that can create some burdens that can make some of these efforts lag quite a bit. And continuity comes from a lot of factors, and political alternance has traditionally been the one element that we discuss as a continuity restrictor. But that has been overcome with the long-term visions that some countries have put. An example, examples you have seen here, Peru is a relevant example, Panama as well. We have a national logistics strategy that is outlined for 2030, and right now we are reevaluating the strategy to move it even beyond that point, because we understand that you cannot be looking at the future right now in 5 years. Yes, a lot can change in 5 years, but we understand that we have to have a roadmap for building long-term. And technologies are going to keep changing. And as they change, we're going to have to keep adapting these plans. But it's very important to have that plan. If you don't have that, you're starting at a very bad point. So on the progress side, I do want to highlight most of the efforts have been focused on extracting value from internal efficiencies. Integrating the rest of the chain is complex. And in Latin America in general, getting to that level 3, has been a lot harder. Part of it is the cultural shift, and part of it as well is the lack of resources sometimes to expand projects to that point, whether it's human resources or whether it's financial resources. So these efforts have been focused a lot around implementing artificial intelligence, big data analytics, and blockchain. At the very least, looking at these technologies, at how they can enable internal value extraction. Internal value extraction doesn't have to be only reducing costs. It can be extracting value by growing market or by simply providing some value-added elements to your customers. So many of the customer-facing processes have been of great focus. Terminal automation has been something that has been started with some speed, but is still lagging compared to some of the other parts of the world, where most of the new terminals are either projecting partial or total automation. And the fourth element that I consider as an indicator of progress is greater engagement from public actors due to spillover benefits, and the role of public-private partnerships as an enabler of these initiatives. Now, there are still quite a few barriers. And we in Panama specifically, the center I work with, part of what we do is try to reduce those barriers between actors, try to articulate relationships. So we are aware of how hard these things are to overcome sometimes. Interoperability across digital components to unlock the next layer of value generation is one of the first main barriers I have to mention, because everybody has their own initiatives, and achieving interoperability is not as trivial as it might seem. Even though there are standardized protocols, there are projects worldwide to try to unify data exchange patterns and stuff. Even then, there's still quite a few roadblocks so that people can connect to fluidly. So we have a project here that is focused exactly on that. It's called Porcel. And it's not really a thing that is going to unify everything. It's just a backbone. It's an integration bus so that all the entities, whatever they're doing, they can connect to this single point, to this single layer. And this data exchange layer is going to enable people across the chain to exchange data in pretty much standardized, standardized formats. This is very important because everybody can do their own thing, but we're only gonna extract that next layer of value if we're only gonna unlock it if we actually achieve integration with the other stakeholders. So this is a big barrier to overcome because of the cost benefit thing that is sometimes hard to convey. Connecting the rest of the logistics chain involves increasing effort. As I said, faster than the number of entities involved. You have 20 entities, it's X amount of effort. You have 40 entities, it's not 2X. It's probably like 10X or X squared. And that is a big deal for people involved in this business because it means the cost gets higher, the more pressure you have for a faster rate of return. It makes it really hard to justify sometimes. The third element I see is a big barrier in Latin America is government projects need to become state projects. As I mentioned, many countries have national logistics strategies, national logistics visions, national logistics, fill the blank. Sometimes these are affiliated to a government plan, and government plans tend to only last as long as the government decides it's going to stay there. If the political alternates can be a roadblock. So they have to become state projects. So enabling, putting it at the level of a strategy is very important, and making it a mandate is even more important. The Panama National Logistics Strategy is in a law because it kind of forces or induces a certain kind of clarity of that roadmap. When we update it, we're going to have to do that again because it's very important to convey the reasoning that it doesn't end when the current government ends, because the country is still the same. We have to keep moving forward towards the future. And the final two I want to highlight, and Pascal, you brought it up right on time, and I think both Joanna and Ricardo touched these points. Linking research and education. We keep wondering about how Latin America is going to move forward. People are going to be the critical element in this chain, because without knowledge, you can't build anything. I mean, digital transformation can occur from importing knowledge, sure. But we have to build the internal capabilities so that we can actually give speed to these projects. So it's very important to link our research institutions or research labs and the education strategy so we can start building the human capabilities in our workforce, not only for the new generations. We have to be aware that when we work in this digital transformation business and when we enter the automation realm, the one big element is how do you transform the workforce that's already there? The new workforce is going to come already with some preconceptions, and that they were born in an era where smartphones existed. I was born in an era where you use Atari to play video games. I mean, come on, it's very different. It's a whole different world. So we have to be aware that we're not digital natives, not all of us. So we have to educate that workforce that is already there. That's a very critical element so that we can have a sustainable logistics system. And also we have to remember the key thing: digital empowers human. It's not the other way around. Digital empowers human. Human drives digital. It's us. It's the human element that drives the change. So, to wrap up, because I don't want to go over my time, there's 3 keys moving forward. And I want to highlight keys, the word keys, because I'm touching my keyboard right now, and this is kind of my keyboard. And there's 3 keys there that I think are very critical in defining how we move forward, not only in Panama, but across the region. First, we can look at those 3. First, we have to enter with a plan. A lot of people enter this whole digital transformation thing. They look at it as a leapfrog, where I'm going to leapfrog my competitors, and they don't have a plan of how to achieve it. It's more like, oh, I like that word. I like that. Somebody told me that works. I'm going to enter that way. No, you have to enter with a plan. It's expensive if you do it. It's more expensive if you don't have a plan and it fails. So the cost of failing is significant. So you have to enter with a clear plan, clear business objectives that go beyond just saving costs. But how are you going to generate value for your customers? Because your competitors are going to do the same. So you have to enter with a clear business plan of how you're going to use all this data you're generating for a positive element in building your business. The second, I think is very critical, is shift the culture. You have to shift the mindset of people, make the workforce understand that technology works for them. It's going to enable them to do things faster. It's not about reducing jobs. It's about making jobs more efficient and then shifting those jobs to something else. And finally, control and monitor. We love implementing stuff. We hate measuring it. So it's very important to control and monitor the benefits and the outputs of the system so that you can make sure that you're extracting the value that you actually need. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. I think I went a couple minutes over my time, but I guess I was very excited to spend some time with you. So I'll just transfer it back to you, Pascal. We can talk a bit later.
Thank you, Jorge. Very comprehensive analysis. And one thing I like very much when we, especially related to you need to have a plan. This is the long-term financial sustainability of any initiatives. In terms of data collaboration, it's clear that it's not only a CapEx issue, it's becoming more an OpEx issue, especially when we move to different infrastructure. But it's the OpEx for the cloud, it's the OpEx for all the SaaS services, it's OpEx for all the teams that you need to build. So it's a very important, like going back to Peru, the Supreme Decree, building the digital infrastructure of the states. And this is a responsibility of states also to provide the financing to build the infrastructure, not only on a CapEx perspective, but also to think operators, to think long-term. Now we're going to move next to our last speaker before we move to Q&A. Feel free, we have lots of questions, but feel free to have more questions. If we're not able to answer it today, we will do it also by replying directly to you. Gary, floor is yours.
Thank you, Pascal, and thank you, TOC, for inviting me to speak here and hear those great speakers that were before. What I want to talk about, it's more about the innovation ecosystem and the example of the Israeli innovation ecosystem, how it is the catalyst for new technologies implementation. And I hope that this example will help you in your thoughts in implementing in Latin America. A few words about myself. I give consulting services of digital transformation, innovation, and cybersecurity, mainly in the maritime supply chain, to port authorities, port operators, and also to maritime tech startups companies. I think that standardization activities are very important, so I participate in a number of standardization activities, one of them also with Pascal in IAPH that recently published the port facility cybersecurity guidelines. My knowledge in the maritime supply chain is that until recently I was the CIO of Israel Ports Company, that it's the company that planned and implements and operates the Israeli port community system, a very advanced one. And also I am a part of the International Port Community System Association Executive Committee. So let's talk about the maritime tech innovation ecosystem in Israel. So in Israel, the government encourages companies to be active factor in the innovation. It encourages the companies to define effective innovation mechanism at the organizational level. Also to integrate constantly innovation in the company activities and implement new technologies, of course. But in my opinion, the most important thing that they encourage is to make the national infrastructure available for startups, because each of the port authorities, also in Latin America, has a lot of infrastructure that can be a good base for making pilots with new technology. So this is infrastructure that shall be in some way available to startups to promote their solutions. So who participate in the Israeli innovation ecosystem? First of all, the government companies authority, but there is another authority that is dedicated only for innovation. It's the Israeli Innovation Authority. The Israel Ports Company, that is a government-owned company, it's a landlord of the ports in Israel, also is part of this ecosystem, trying to support it and promote it. And all of my colleagues before me talked about the education, and yes, it's very important to promote it. So cooperation with academy is very important to promote new technologies and innovation. And for that reason, Israel Post Company has a subsidiary together with one of the greatest universities in Israel, the Technion. The terminal operators also have their side on the building and promoting startups and innovation. And there is at least one of the ports in Israel that is very active on that. It's a port of Ashdod. But another important member of the stakeholder of this ecosystem is the startup accelerators. And in Israel, there is a few years ago started one dedicated maritime tech startup called the TOC. Recently, another accelerator, Ariel Capital, entered for ocean tech activities. But we are talking about ports. It's also physical infrastructure. So there is another accelerator for physical infrastructure and construction that it's called Contec, that also is part of this ecosystem. You can see you can see the results in the number of maritime tech startups. There are around 200 startups, various solutions to the maritime supply chain. But new technologies and innovation, we always talk about, my colleagues here, 5G and blockchain and IoT and AI. We keep on talking about the same technologies. So I decided that today we start talking about a new technology, and McKinsey helped me on that because they mapped 10 innovations, new technologies for the future. So let's get used to another word, and it's biocomputing, the biological material uses for computing purposes, mainly for expanding the data storage using DNA. So let's start talking not only about the regular ones, let's start talking about biocomputing and looking ahead far. But innovation and technology is the tool, not the goal. So I encourage you to constantly look for improvements and new services that are powered by new technologies. But first, look for improvements and new services to your to the community. I want to rapidly go through a number of very good practical implementations of new technologies, because again, we are talking about pilots and things like that. No, there is a number of companies that already are in production with great new technologies. In blockchain, we have WebBL, that is a digital carrier of trade, documents of title, bill of lading, and others. And they have a number of advanced solutions with the ZIM and MSC and Hapag-Lloyd, and recently one. Ailer, a container with embedded IoT. They call themselves a Journey Overseas, a Swiss company. And the interesting thing is we are talking about technology, but what about material? They do the container, they make a container with different material. It's also a physical innovation. AI-Doc, they have a solution for automating paperwork, like also customer classification, like Carlos told about another company that does something similar. Orca AI, that uses all of those companies, a lot of companies using AI. Orca AI is ship anti-collision solutions. DocTech, it's monitoring the ports and river waterways depth, and they are active in 12 ports in Brazil. And till the end of the year, they will have 24 ports around the world. Windward, they are a very advanced company, recently received a patent in the US for their solution, and they have a predictive intelligence risk for management for maritime domain. Sierra, that uses AI for enabling underwater vision, and a Finnish from Finland, a company called Awake AI, that with AI they enhance the berth planning. So that there is a lot of new technologies. There are some technologies that we have to think about for the future. But what I want to leave, it's a quote for a great person that he said that he doesn't regret any of his dreams. His only regret is not having dreamed more. And to my Latin American colleagues, yo quiero decir que él no se arrepiente de ninguno de sus sueños, sino se arrepintió de no soñar más. So I call the Latin American to dream big and make innovation in the maritime supply chain. Thank you very much. To you, Pascal.
Well, thank you, Gary. It has been very impressive as usual, but it's very important to us today in Latin America and the Caribbean to understand the ecosystems of Israel from a maritime perspective. I have to say really that this ecosystem is really on the top 5 worldwide, along with some of the range north of Europe and Singapore in Asia, and also on the Mid-Sea. And a number of startups that personally I've been following for the last 3 years that are coming out of the dock are really getting into real implementation in our business and maritime trade. As you mentioned, WaveBL more recently this week announced a new deal with ONE, but among others, I think the electronic bill of lading in maritime trade logistics in the region is very important to us, because we still, on the public side, still paper-based on many documentation. And again, last year, we also another Supreme Decree in Peru for the EBL that was very important. So to have solution like WaveBL and others, it's very relevant. So we know that we are running out of time, so we're going to take still a few minutes. We have lots of questions. For housekeeping purpose for the audience, do know with the platform that we're using here, you have the capacity to ask for meetings with the speakers directly to address your questions. So please feel free to do so. This is it's our new platform. TOC, and it's very powerful. I'm gonna go to one question, which is for Joanna. We have different questions for Vuse, so I'm gonna take only one. And the question is, how can public and private sector cooperate to maximize the benefits of the Vuse? So the question is about how public and private partnership. Joanna?
Thanks, Pascal. Okay, the purpose is to provide a better service to the private sectors and only sector. It's necessary work together, together the public sector and the private sector for design the services to trade facilitation and to maritime single window, for example. The analysis, diagnosis, and redesign process is necessary work the public sector with the private sector for develop the different services, as for example PCS. Is necessary work together in coordination. And in the services, it's necessary implement the interoperability. For this is necessary standardization data. And take international recommendation, for example, for IMO recommendations or for whole business process. It's necessary to take care in follow these recommendations, global recommendations, for all the services understand, the system understand, the maritime single window understand the document sent by terminal operators or maritime agencies or maybe shipping lines. Standardization the data, standardization the process, and follow the international recommendations. This is the way of the work in the public and private sector and work together.
Okay, thank you very much, Joanna. Gary, we have one question about moving to full automation on a terminal on the world. The question is, do you think full automation is reality at any terminal in the world? If you can just pick that up. But I'd like to go back beyond. I mean, we have been talking a lot on the logistics side today, on the port side, but also there is automation on the vessel side. And I know that one of startup Porca AI, great stuff, and with some good business case recently. Can we talk about also automation from the vessel side?
Yes. Automation, there's a lot of activities for autonomous vessels. And when you're talking about autonomous vessels, also we have to think not only the big ships. What about the pilot, the automated pilotage? Okay, and that's it's gonna be earlier than the big ships, autonomous big ships. That pilot boats are remote operated, and this is I think one of the first stages. But what I want to say, it's also that we have to be prepared, because those autonomous ships and terminals will need a lot of information available, okay, and also will generate a lot of information, more than that we have today. So we have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. Jorge, a question which is related to the maturity level. I think it's a big subject that we have, especially when we have Central America, the Caribbean, and South America. When we're talking about ports and ministry and states, one question is, how efficient and effective are those strategies in implementing a digital solution, identifying and understanding the maturity level? This is right. We have 3 different geographical areas where the maturity is different. But at the end of the day, the culture of paper is still there everywhere. So have you been working at Georgia Tech in the maturity level and assessing the maturity level and developing methodology on the maturity level on your end?
Well, we have been involved in many different projects, directly or indirectly, in some terms measuring outcomes of the projects. I think it's very important to have a sense of the impact that the projects are having, right? So we have ongoing initiatives that are related in some way to our maritime single window. We integrate data coming from different port terminals to try to understand some of the elements of the business that sometimes are missed in the bigger picture. We work with trade data as well. And the one thing I see is, philosophically, you can look at the maturity level at a national, at the national level, but in a way, different institutions have themselves different levels of maturity when it comes to working with data. And that can be a challenge sometimes, because when you're trying to integrate all the stakeholders in the chain, the weakest link in the chain is the one that's going to define how strong the chain itself is. And that is going to be the same in these projects, because you have to get everybody kind of close to the same level so you can actually make them work together. Otherwise, you're always going to have people holding back the projects. So we have been involved a lot in some of these initiatives, mainly in working with specific stakeholders to address processes, individual processes that need imminent or immediate solutions, so that then they can get sold on the concept of, let's make this bigger, let's make this better. So we ourselves don't design the bigger solution, but we try to create a bridge between what would be the rapid prototype in a way, so that they can feel this level of comfort so that they can ramp up. I think we're a facilitator in a way. But I would say that a key element here is just that, like I said, private sector, a lot of these actors, especially at the shipping line level, the port operator level, they are linked to global actors. So the standards with which they work tend to be global or aligned with multinational institutions. When you go to the national level, at the government level, it's all local. And then when you go farther into the chain, when you're talking with importers and you're talking with, for example, land transportation actors, those tend to be more local. So then you have a little bit of a conflict of philosophies as well of work. So I think getting that all the people together in the same room, but also addressing their concerns with digitalization. There are concerns with privacy and all the other things. Getting rid of those concerns is going to be a key element in getting the smaller companies of the chain really sold on the concept. They are the ones that actually can benefit the most from this, but they're not sure that's the case.
Yeah, thank you, Jorge. Carlos, one question that was not asked so far, but I need, because we are running out of time, to ask it to you. Right now, the venture capital market is very hot on log tech, very hot. I mean, we're starting to see many unicorns. It's not only the Flexport. We got Forto in Berlin, raised about more than 240 million US. What's next for Logity in terms of venture financing? Where are you?
Okay, we are looking for first having whole understanding about Latin American logistics industry, and then we look forward to get a venture capital support. So, in Latin America, we are to the process are the same, and that the problem that, as Jorge mentioned, is about that we are separated, and there is no government or institutions that actually bring together and work together as Latin America. You can see Europe. I mean, the application of Ports 4.0 from Spain. That's a government strategy with working with the private sector, and I mean startups. So maybe the next year we'll be knocking at the door of the venture capital, but we need to first understand more the market. And I'm so proud about Latin America. You have an Outports, you have CargoX, you have a Rappi. There are new unicorns, and they belong to the logistics industry. You remember the fintech, the neologism of financial technology. So logtech is actually growing up today.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm gonna have the last question. Thank you, Carlos. I'm gonna have the last question for Joanna. Joanna, beyond Mincentur, you are also a board member of Vista Peru. Are you looking at Vista Peru in pushing and making this ecosystem of startup and innovation in shipping and in maritime trade becoming a reality as well, also in Peru? Are you involved in this at Vista?
Yes, I think so, Kyle. Yes, I am a member of Vista Peru and Vista International Futures Committee. It's important the participation, the wisdom, because it's in a space congregate the woman who participates in different in the sector, but in different agencies and companies. It's in a space to join the woman, to share information, to share the experiences for example, in Peru, and create a knowledge and promote different events, conference, webinars to share the knowledge in the trade sector, maritime sector, logistics. It's very, very important because allowed to interchange information, initiatives. One person is in a maven terminal operator. I work in Minsatur, or other in Port Authority, in different spaces, and share information. What do you do?
So it's a good forum really to make that also this message.
And empowerment, the women in the sector, but it's important because
I think it's a very good platform, Joanna, to introduce really, the startup world, and maybe Gadi also can help from his maritime experience of ecosystem in this country, in Israel. We are running now out of time. I'm going to give the floor to Matteo to conclude. Thank you all.
Thank you, Pascal. Thank you, Carlos, Ricardo, Jorge, Joanna, and Gary for your presentations and for this discussion. It has certainly been very exciting to learn more about the digital opportunities for the region. Um, I know there have been lots of questions that have not been yet answered, so I do encourage the audience to try to connect on our platform on Grape and set up meetings and just could carry on with the discussion. Also, I want to remind you that this session will be repurposed on the third week of Tech Connect with subtitles in Spanish for all our Spanish speaking audience. So, yeah, keep in touch, stay connected. Let's keep the discussion going for our industry. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye bye all.
Thank you.
Bye.